Grayson Hall stood tall amidst the other buildings on the college campus, its brick facade weathered by years of existence. Inside its aging walls, stories whispered of the strange and the supernatural. Among its many rooms, one held a secret darker than most, room 213. Sarah had never been one to believe in ghosts or hauntings. She was a rational girl, focused on her studies and eager to make the most of her freshman year. When she moved into room 213 at the beginning of the semester, she saw it as nothing more than a place to sleep and study. The room seemed innocuous enough at first, a standard dorm room with 2 beds, desks, and a small window overlooking the courtyard. Sarah unpacked her belongings, decorating the space with posters and pictures from home. But as the days passed, she began to notice strange occurrences. It started with little things, objects misplaced, whispers in the night. Sarah chalked it up to the stress of starting college, dismissing the strange happenings as figments of her imagination. But as the incidents grew more frequent, she could no longer ignore them. One night, Sarah woke to the sound of whispering in her ear. Startled, she sat up in bed, scanning the room for the source of the noise. But there was no one there. She shook her head, convinced she was dreaming, and tried to go back to sleep. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Sarah pulled the covers over her head, trying to drown out the sound, but it was no use. The voices seemed to be coming from all around her, filling the room with their eerie chorus. Terrified, Sarah reached for her phone, intending to call for help. But as her hand brushed against the nightstand, she froze. There, lying next to her phone, was a photograph. A faded image of 2 young men, their faces frozen in a moment of laughter. Sarah stared at the photo, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen it before, yet there it was, as if it had always been there. Trembling, she reached out to touch it, but before her fingers could make contact, the photo burst into flames, disappearing in a puff of smoke. Shaken to her core, Sarah knew she had to find out the truth about room 213. She spent hours researching the history of Grayson Hall, combing through old newspapers and yearbooks in search of answers. And what she uncovered sent chills down her spine. Years ago, room 213 had been the site of a tragic incident. A young student had gone mad, murdering his roommate in a fit of rage before taking his own life. The details were murky, but the rumors persisted. The room was haunted by the restless spirits of those who had died there. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah sought out the help of a local paranormal investigator. Together, they delved into the mysteries of room 213, conducting seances and rituals in an attempt to communicate with the spirits that lingered there. But as they probed deeper into the darkness, they soon realized they were in over their heads. The spirits grew restless, their anger palpable in the air. Objects flew across the room, books toppled off shelves, and the temperature dropped to bone-chilling levels. Sarah and the investigator pressed on, refusing to be intimidated by the supernatural forces that surrounded them. But as they performed their final ritual, a sense of dread washed over Sarah. She could feel a presence in the room, something dark and malevolent lurking just beyond her sight. And then, with a deafening roar, the spirits revealed themselves. 2 figures materialized before them, the ghosts of the young men who had died in room 213 all those years ago. Their eyes burned with a fierce intensity, their mouths twisted into grotesque sneers. Sarah and the investigator watched in horror as the spirits closed in on them, their icy touch sending shivers down their spines. In that moment, Sarah knew they had to flee. With a cry of terror, she grabbed the investigator's hand and raced for the door, desperate to escape the wrath of the vengeful spirits. They burst out of room 213 and into the hallway beyond, the echoes of the spirits' screams following them as they ran. As they reached the safety of the outside world, Sarah collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. She looked back at Grayson Hall, its imposing facade looming over her like a dark specter. And though she knew she would never forget the horrors she'd witnessed within its walls, She also knew she had survived, a testament to her strength and resilience in the face of true terror. Alpha Sigma Theta. The name alone sent shivers down the spines of those who knew its dark history. Perched on a hill overlooking the campus, the fraternity house stood as a monument to the past, its grand facade hiding a sinister secret. For within its walls lurked a curse that had haunted the house for generations. It was a chilly autumn evening when a group of eager pledges gathered outside the imposing mansion, ready to embark on their initiation into Alpha Sigma Theta. They had heard the rumors of the house's dark past, of the tragedies that had befallen those who dared to enter its halls, but they paid them no heed. They were young and fearless, eager to prove themselves worthy of membership in the prestigious fraternity. As night fell and the moon rose high in the sky, the pledges filed into the house, their hearts pounding with excitement. They were greeted by the older members of the fraternity, who welcomed them with open arms and raised glasses. The atmosphere was jovial, the air thick with anticipation. But as the night wore on, the mood began to shift. Doors slammed shut on their own, shadows danced in the flickering candlelight, and strange noises echoed through the halls. The pledges laughed nervously, trying to brush off the unease that gnawed at the edges of their minds. But deep down, they knew something was not right. It was during a game of truth or dare that the true horror of Alpha Sigma Theta revealed itself. One of the pledges, a brave soul named Mike, was dared to spend the night alone in the infamous attic, a place rumored to be the epicenter of the house's curse. With a cocky grin, Mike accepted the challenge, eager to prove his bravery to his fellow pledges. As the others watched from below, Mike ascended the creaky staircase to the attic, his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. But as soon as he crossed the threshold, a chill swept over him, sending shivers down his spine. The air was thick with an oppressive sense of dread, and he could feel eyes watching him from the shadows. Undeterred, Mike pressed on, determined to conquer whatever darkness lurked within the attic. But as the hours passed, his confidence waned, replaced by a creeping sense of fear. Strange noises echoed through the rafters, and shadows danced across the walls, their movements unnatural and sinister. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, Mike heard it, a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the attic like a banshee's wail. Terrified, he scrambled to his feet, his heart racing in his chest. He turned to flee, but the door was sealed shut, trapping him in the darkness with whatever malevolent force lurked within. Meanwhile, the other pledges waited anxiously below, their laughter fading into nervous whispers as the night wore on. Hours passed with no sign of Mike, and a sense of unease settled over them like a heavy fog. They tried to convince themselves it was just a prank, that Mike would emerge from the attic any moment with a triumphant grin on his face. But as dawn broke and the first light of morning filtered through the windows, there was still no sign of Mike. Panic swept through the fraternity house, and the pledges rushed to the attic, desperate to find their missing brother. But when they opened the door, they were met with a sight that would haunt them for the rest of their days. The attic was empty, devoid of life or light. There was no sign of Mike, no trace of his presence except for a single word scrawled in blood on the wall. Beware. And though the pledges searched high and low, combing every inch of the attic for clues, they found nothing except for the overwhelming sense of dread that hung in the air like a shroud. In the days that followed, the fraternity house stood empty and abandoned, its doors locked tight against the outside world. The pledges whispered of curses and ghosts, of a darkness that consumed all who dared to enter Alpha Sigma Theta. And though the campus tried to forget, the legend of the cursed fraternity house lived on, a cautionary tale for those who dared to tempt fate. Nestled at the heart of the college campus, the library stood as a bastion of knowledge and learning. Its grand columns and towering shelves held the collective wisdom of centuries, inviting students to explore its depths in search of enlightenment. But behind its serene facade lurked a darkness that few dared to acknowledge, a darkness that had haunted the library for generations. It was a quiet evening in late autumn when a group of curious students gathered outside the library's imposing entrance. They had heard the rumors of strange occurrences within its walls, of books that moved on their own and shadows that watched from the corners, but they brushed them off as the product of overactive imaginations. They were scholars, after all, seekers of truth in a world filled with mysteries. As they stepped into the library, the students were greeted by the soft glow of lamplight and the musty scent of old books. The air was heavy with the weight of centuries, the whispers of the past echoing through the halls. But the students paid them no heed, their minds focused on the task at hand, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the library's labyrinthine corridors. As they delved deeper into the stacks, the students began to notice strange things. Books that seemed to move of their own accord, their pages fluttering in the breeze of some unseen force. At first, they dismissed it as a trick of the light, a figment of their imagination. But as the night wore on, the phenomena grew more pronounced, more sinister. One by one, the students became separated, lost in a maze of corridors that seemed to shift and change before their very eyes. Desperate and terrified, they called out to each other, their voices swallowed by the darkness. But there was no response, no sign of their fellow seekers in the endless expanse of the library. As they wandered deeper into the shadows, the students began to sense a presence lurking just beyond their sight, a malevolent force that hungered for their souls. They could feel its icy touch on their skin, its whispers in their ears, urging them to abandon all hope and surrender to the darkness. But still they pressed on, driven by a determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. They searched every nook and cranny of the library, scouring its shelves for clues, but the answers remained elusive, just beyond their grasp. And as the night wore on and exhaustion set in, they began to fear they would never escape the clutches of the malevolent force that held them captive. Then, just as all hope seemed lost, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber deep within the bowels of the library, a chamber shrouded in darkness and secrecy. And there, in the flickering light of their torches, they found what they had been searching for. An ancient tome bound in black leather, its pages stained with the blood of those who had dared to read it. With trembling hands, the students opened the book, eager to unlock its secrets. But as they read the words inscribed within, a sense of dread washed over them like a tidal wave. For the book spoke of dark rituals and forbidden knowledge, of a power beyond comprehension that lay dormant within the library's walls, waiting to be unleashed upon the world. Realizing the danger they were in, the students resolved to destroy the book and put an end to the darkness that had plagued the library for so long. With a solemn vow, they gathered their strength and performed the ritual of banishment, invoking the ancient forces of light to drive out the darkness once and for all. As they completed the ritual, a blinding light filled the chamber, illuminating the darkness and dispelling the shadows that had haunted the library for generations. And when the light faded, the students found themselves standing outside the library, their bodies weary but their spirits triumphant. From that day on, the library stood as a beacon of knowledge and learning once more, its halls free from the malevolent force that had once held sway over them. And though the students who had ventured into its depths would never forget the horrors they had witnessed, they knew they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, stronger and wiser for the experience.